So we are looking at today the concept of Jewish grappling, right? So it's called Where Art Thou, God? And we're going to really delve into this topic, and it's going to be approaching it from multiple different perspectives. So on one hand, it's looking at it in terms of actual Jewish grappling and how do we grapple with God in the current situation with the current crisis of our world with COVID-19. And on the other hand, it's looking at grappling from a historical perspective. So we're not going to just look at like texts for text's sake. We're going to really look at them from what is the context from which these texts arrived, and what does this mean for us as a Jewish people? So that's kind of where we're headed, and the trajectory we're headed in. The point of this particular lesson, though, is that we all can grapple together with this concept of God and such. So before I put everybody on mute, does anybody have any questions for me? Okay, so I'm going to put you all on mute. You all have the ability to unmute yourself when I call on you. And if you have any questions, you can also put them in the chat box or raise your hand. I am going to open the wrong thing. Oh, hold on 2 seconds. I am going to share my PowerPoint. Okay. I'm going to move you all over so I can see you all as always. So let's wait until it opens. All right, does everybody see it? Thumbs up? Okay, we're good. All right, so Where Art Thou, God? A Journey of Jewish Grappling. So the text that I actually started with is called Siduk Hadin. And Siduk Hadin is essentially a translation to the justification of divine judgment. So before we even delve into the text itself, when you see the term of justification of divine judgment, what does that make you think? What does that make you think? There's no right answer or wrong answer. Michael, do you have something?
That divine judgment is correct and good.
Okay, so divine judgment is correct and good. Melissa?
Justifying that what's happening around us is happening for a reason.
Okay, so it's giving reason to maybe something that is hard to explain.
And if I take the judgment out of it, just justification of divine makes me just think of justifying the belief of believing in God, not believing in God, justifying that there is something divine at work.
Okay, okay. Judy?
I thought it sounded legal in a bit, that you were
because
trying
of the term of Beit Din, right? But if you think about it, right, we talk about God, Al Harachamim and Al Hadin, right? And if you look at it from or Al Hadin, like when you look at it from a time of Yom Kippur, do you think of God as the Rachamim or do you think of God as the Din? Tommy?
I don't know what do they mean?
So Rachamim is mercy and Din is judgment.
Okay.
I think okay, so sorry, Susan.
Go ahead.
I think when we are talking about it, about both of them, we are having both sides. It's not a one side or the other side. I think you have sometimes the Rachamim and sometimes you have the Din.
Okay.
Sometimes you have the compassion and sometimes you have the judgment. So it's both sides to it.
And Susan, what were you going to say?
It reminds me of Avinu Malkeinu, meaning that we have a king and a father in the same unit, but we are different relationships. One is a distant awe, respect, and another one is hugging and closeness. But it's both wrapped up in the way we call God during the high holidays. And so there's, duality in that.
There's the duality. Now, when somebody dies, hold on 2 seconds, Edward. we say, what do we say when somebody dies in Judaism? Baruch Dayan Emet. And what does Baruch Dayan Emet? Tommy, do you want to?
Blessed be the
Memory.
Dayan would be the judge or the judgment, the true judge.
The true judge. It's not Baruch Rachamim Emet, or I'm probably doing the Hebrew wrong there, but it's not, right? Like it's about judging, right? So Ed, you had something to say?
You say, for example, in Breshit,
Yeah.
there are two names for God in the beginning. One is Yud-Hey Vav-Hey, and the other is Elohim. And I forget which is which, but according to the rabbis, one of them represented sort of God as sort of the absolute sort of, black and white judger, and the other one is the God of mercy. So right from the beginning, the rabbis really recognized that there were those two qualities.
These two qualities.
Talked about.
That's right. Now I have another question for all of you. Does anybody know Tziduk Hadin and where this comes from in our liturgy? So
No.
Tziduk Hadin is not a very well-known liturgical piece, but it is a piece that is very significant within the context of our religion. It is said during a funeral. So in a Jewish funeral, at the Levaya, what happens is you go to the Levaya, right? And the grave is lowered, or the casket is lowered into the ground. And then what do Jews do? Is we shovel the dirt onto the grave. And Jews, that is very different than non-Jewish burials, is we stay until the entire grave is completely covered and filled in. And at the end of that, Tziduk Hadin is said. So that's when Tziduk Hadin is said. Now, I did not bring the full text of Tziduk Hadin, so I'm going to show you the part that I brought. So I brought the two lines from Tziduk Hadin. So the first one is coming. There we go. Is on the left, and the second line is on the right. So, Michael, do you mind reading for us?
The rock, perfect in all his works, who can say to him, "What have you done?" He rules below and above. He brings death and restores life, brings down to the grave and raises up from there.
Perfect. So let's now read the second one, and then we're going to discuss these two and juxtapose these two together. So go ahead.
Rock, perfect in his deeds, who can say to him, "What do you do?" You who says and fulfills, do undeserved kindness with us, and in the merit of him, Isaac, who was bound on the altar like a lamb, hearken and grant our request.
Okay. So these two texts, the very first one is coming from Deuteronomy, from Devarim. And it's coming at a time when basically the Israelites are basically being compared to those who are essentially the problem, right? That they have created the problem. In Deuteronomy 32:4, the rock, his work is perfect, for all his ways are just. God of faithfulness and without iniquity, righteous and fair is he. All right? And it's actually the compared to, and the same token, the Israelites are compared to are basically being brought up as they're the issue. They're the reason that God has to be a God of judgment. Not because he is imperfect, but because people aren't perfect and need a judge. So what does this text tell us, though, when we see it at the end of a funeral? What does this mean? Is significant, right? This is the last thing said. Well, there's a psalm that sometimes is said right after this, which is Psalm 49, but these are the last things that are said as a person like is perceived to be passing from their soul from this earth into the next, like, kind of cosmic realm, if you think about it from a Kabbalistic area. But even from a non-Kabbalistic perspective, this is literally the send-off of a person in their life, in their death, or from their life in their death. And interestingly enough, this used to be said when people passed, immediately when people passed, before it was said, and then it changed to being said at the end. So, but what does this mean when you read something like this? And we say this at the very end. And I tried to find a copy of this, but this is such a, like it's chanted, like a very sad, mournful prayer. Okay. But I couldn't find a good version of it because there's like 3. So what does this mean? What are we not supposed to do?
It looks like we have to accept the death. This is what God is decreeing. It rules everything, and that we need to embrace that situation.
Exactly. What else? Ricky?
I missed what you said in the beginning. My groceries came and I had to put the freezer stuff away. But when I see this and I go back to me, what have you done? Do we blame God too much?
That's the question, and we're going to see that in a later text that we're going to look at. Are we blaming God too much? And we're going to see what happens and what Rambam believes. And we're going to be able to grapple with that. So I want you to hold on to that question because I want to address that when we have a little more text. Judy, what were you going to say? And then Tommy.
Wasn't me.
Okay. Tommy.
When you read the text, he is a rock. He's perfect in all his deeds and his work if we combine both of them. So how can we ask him or challenge him the way it starts?
Right, he's perfect.
It says twice he's perfect in his work and then in his deeds.
Right, so how do you grapple? And interestingly enough, we don't know exactly where this text originated from, but it seems that it had originated from the time of Rabbi Hanania ben, and I'm not going to pronounce his name correctly, Teredion, from the Talmud tractate of Avodah Zarah. And basically, the story goes that he was being burned at the stake, and his response of being burned at the stake was to say these words, and that his wife continued them, and then his daughter continued them. So as somebody was being killed for their beliefs, they were saying these, he was quoting the Tanakh, and then his wife continued quoting the Tanakh, and then his daughter. And so supposedly this entire text is created of those quotes from the different biblical references. And one of the things, and the reason I brought this in at first is that this is one way of looking at this question, right? That you're not allowed to question, that you're not allowed to grapple. But let's look at another text, okay?
Okay.
So the next text is Genesis, or Bereshit 32, 25 through 31. Trudy, do you mind reading for us? I'm going to take you off of mute. Okay, go ahead.
Jacob was left alone, and the man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. When he saw that he had not prevailed against him, he wrenched Jacob's hip at its socket, so that the socket of his hip was strained as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for dawn is breaking." But he answered, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Said the other, "What is your name?" He replied, "Jacob." That was my dad's name. Said he, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel. For you have striven and being divine and human and have prevailed." Jacob asked, "Pray tell me your name." But he said, "You must not ask my name." And he took leave of him there. So Jacob named the place Peniel, meaning I seen a divine being face to face, yet my life has been preserved.
So what does this text tell us? Just off of the face value of this text, which is called Pshat. What are we reading?
There was a fight.
Yep.
Jacob was winning. His foe, you might say, did something illegal.
Okay.
In order to break out, and because he saw that Jacob was strong, he gave him the name of Israel.
Yep. And what happens, and who is this person? Do we know who this person is that wrestled with him?
Well, you assume it's an angel.
We assume it's an angel. And why do we assume it's an angel?
He couldn't tell him his name.
He couldn't tell him his name. And what did we see at the very last?
He needed to get going before dawn.
Yep. And what do we see at the very last verse?
He faced a divine being.
Right. So this is the divine being, right? So on the first text we read we're not supposed to question anything. But in this text, what are we being given?
The ability to question?
The ability to question. To the point where his name is changed from Jacob, Yaakov, to Israel or Yisrael. So when you look at the name Yisrael, we are in a situation where we have to look at etymology of it, right? So the etymology is twofold. There are two parts to Yisrael. There's the Yud Shin Resh, and then there's the Aleph Lamed. The Yud Shin Resh supposedly comes from Sarah, and that's a root that means to prevail or to wrestle. And the El stands for God. So anytime you see El at the ends of a Hebrew word,
it means
there's
God
in it, right? So this literally means the one who wrestles with God. So Jacob's name was changed. So that's the other reason that we're taught that we know that he wrestled with God, is because his name was changed to the one who wrestles with God. Now, what are the Jewish people called throughout the Bible?
Israelites.
B'nai Yisrael.
And B'nai Yisrael, right?
Right.
The children who are of Israel. So what does that literally translate to is the children who wrestle with
God.
So we literally are called the people, like we are literally the people who wrestle with God. So we read Siduk Hadin at a funeral, but yet we're told, what are we told by our name? What are we supposed to do?
Fight it.
We're supposed to grapple. We're supposed to question. We're supposed to wrestle with this concept and with this divine presence. But what does that mean? Right? Now I have a question also. We're B'nai Yisrael, but we're also told we're the chosen people. So we are the chosen people that are allowed to, who are literally be called, and chosen is not even like the best translation of Segula. Segula. It's like treasured people is really a better translation. So that we're the treasured people who are also the ones who are wrestling with God. And why are we treasured? We're treasured because we're God's treasure. So we're literally grappling with these two things in the Tanakh, in the text. Now let's look at the next text, is the Shema. So what is the Shema? We all know the Shema. What is it?
Declaration that we believe in one God.
It's the declaration that we believe in one God. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. However, it's very interesting. So we have an ayin, and we have at the end of the shema, what letter gets confused often with the ayin?
Aleph, I guess.
Olive.
Aleph.
Aleph. So we get confused often with an aleph, right?
Mhm.
At the end, we have a chad. What letter gets confused often with the dalid?
Reish.
A resh. So now, Tommy, go ahead and read what we have here.
Shema Israel Adonai Elokeinu Adonai Echad.
Acher.
What does that mean?
God is other.
Perhaps of Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is
Another.
another. So literally, we have this text that is so easy to confuse, and it's important for us to understand that we really have to say the Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, and not get confused to say Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, because one is saying here, right? Here,
Mhm.
and one is saying perhaps. One is saying the only, and one is saying maybe another. So even within this, you have the juxtaposition of this grappling and this possibility that if you don't say it right, and if you get it confused, you accidentally say it wrong, right? Now I have a question for you, which is, by saying Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, are we guaranteed that life is going to be good? If we say not
There's no
Shema
guarantees.
Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, but we say Shema, are we guaranteed a life with no grappling?
No.
There
We're
are no
not.
guarantees.
No.
Guarantees,
No.
right? Now I want to show you. So the rabbis realized people were making. Oh, Tommy, go ahead.
Because really, it's just saying Shema Israel, listen Israel to God. It doesn't tell us anything what it will be. There are no any decision. Is it good? Is it bad? Nothing. Just listen.
Just listen. Now, Edward brought up the fact that the ayin and the dalet are larger. And so as you can see in this particular text, I actually showed it more like how it's written in the Torah, as well as how it's written in our sidurs. Now, what happens if you take the ayin and the dalet out? Ed, what word do you get?
Aid,
Aid. And what does aid mean?
witness.
Witness.
Witness. Why are we a witness?
Wow, this is pretty
We're testifying something that we know to be true.
We're testifying something we know to be true, so we're a witness. And what is the truth that we're testifying to?
That God is one.
That God is one. Yet we're told simultaneously that we're supposed to be grappling with God at the same time, right?
Well, are we
Because we're
talking?
B'nai Yisrael. So is there a difference between grappling and believing?
No.
No or yes?
It doesn't, because you grapple doesn't mean you don't believe.
Correct.
Right.
But so often what happens is when people grapple with God, what happens? They stop
Believing.
believing.
Could this Yisrael be Yaakov that we're talking to? And
Maybe.
we're identifying with his grappling and his struggle. And
Or
we're
it's
saying,
the collective most likely it's the collective Israel, just because the Shema comes in Deuteronomy, and the last time we see Yaakov or Yisrael is in Genesis, and so we're way forward in the Tanakh story. But we are literally like here. So like translate it this way: Hear, oh, the ones who wrestle with God, the Lord, right? The Lord our God, the Lord is one. It holds it all together in one context, right? It didn't say Shema Yisrael or Shema B'nai Yisrael or Shema Ivri. It said Shema Yisrael. So it's the idea is that you can grapple, but at the same time being a witness of the divinity of God simultaneously together. And you can hold that space together at the same time. Does anybody have any questions about this text? Okay, we're going to go on to the next text. So now we're fast forwarding to the Babylonian Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud was codified in 500 CE. The Mishnah was codified in 200 CE. So the Babylonian Talmud includes Mishnah and Gemara. So the Mishnah is first, and then the Gemara comes second, with Gemara being written between 300 and 500 CE. Okay, so that's our time frame that we're looking at. So we're literally looking at a 500-year span, or if not more, of rabbis arguing with each other and disagreeing. And there's a Talmudic term called a machloket, which is a disagreement. And literally, I always tell all my students that the Talmud is a bunch of dead people arguing with dead people. Like that's what it is. So we're going to add our voice to this conversation now, because we need to put our voice in here, okay? So let's read the first paragraph. Belinda, do you mind reading? Let's see if she minds reading.
I can't see it.
Oh, you can't see it?
It's
Oh,
very,
no.
very tiny for me.
It's
Okay.
very tiny.
It's very tiny. It is very tiny. Michael, can you read it? Can you see it?
Yes, we learned in the Mishnah, one is obligated to recite a blessing for the bad that befalls him, just as he recites a blessing for the good that befalls him. The Gemara asks, what does it mean? One is obligated to recite a blessing for the bad, just as for the good. If we say this means that just as one recites a blessing for a positive event with the formula, who is good and does good, so too one recites a blessing with the formula, who is good and does good. Didn't we learn in our Mishnah that over good things one recites, who is good and does good, while over bad things one recites, blessed the true judge. Rather, Rava says the Mishnah's statement was only necessary to instruct us to accept bad tidings in the same joy with which we accept good tidings, not to instruct to which blessing to recite. I'm sorry, that confused me.
All right, so it confused. Who else is confused? Raise your hand if you're confused. Like, what is going on here? Okay, so this is what you do with the Talmud. You read it, you sit there, and it's even more confusing in the Aramaic, because the Aramaic half the time is in shorthand. So you're like, what did I just read? Okay, so let's parse this out all together, yeah? And there's more to this text, and I haven't included it yet, which is why there's a bunch of blank space down here, okay? All right, so we learned in the Mishnah. So the Mishnah is written before 200 CE, okay? One is obligated to recite a blessing. And when are we obligated to recite a blessing? For the bad that befalls him and for the good. But look at the way that it's written. For the bad that befalls him and for the good that befalls him. In English, would you use the term befalls for good? Or would you just use befalls for bad?
Probably just for bad.
Probably just for bad. So we're seeing even here. Go ahead, Ricky.
My question is, why is bad put before good?
So bad is put before good. And one of the things that you should always know about the Mishnah and the Talmud is the way it was redacted is that everything is put for a
Reason.
Right? So what is the reason? Do we have to be told that we have to recite a blessing for good? Or do we have to be told to recite a blessing for bad?
You got the reason.
Right? So we have to be told we have to recite a blessing for the bad. But we should also recite a blessing for the good that befalls you. Okay? So it's equating these experiences together by using the same term. Then we go to the Gemara. So we know we're now between the 200 and the 500 CE time period when we're in the Gemara. And it says, what does it mean? Like, what does this mean? We should say a blessing, right? I don't understand. Why are we supposed to do this? It says one is obligated to recite a blessing for the bad, justice for the good. Like, it's a question. Like, they're literally saying, are you crazy? Are you fakakta crazy? Like, why do we have to do this? If we say this means that just as one recites a blessing for a positive event with the formula, who is good and does good, so too one recites a blessing for calamity with the formula, who is good and does good. Didn't we learn in our Mishnah that over good tidings one recites who is good and does good, while over bad tidings one recites bless the true judge? So the question is, do you say the exact same blessing, or do you say a different blessing? You have a different formula.
You have a different formula.
You have a different formula. And bless the true judge, what is that formula? When do we say that formula? We already talked about it.
Siddur Kadim.
We talked about it with Siddur Kadim, but it's not Siddur Kadim. It's Baruch Dayan Ha
Emet.
Emet. Okay?
That's death.
So that's the formula. And then we have a rabbi, his name is Rava, and Rava is from the 320 to 350 CE time period. And he says, the mission statement was only necessary to instruct us to accept bad tidings with the same joy with which we accept good tidings, not to instruct us with regard to which blessing to recite. So it's telling us what? It's not telling us what to say, it's telling us how to accept it. It's not about if you say this blessing versus this blessing. It's saying that you have to accept it either way with the same intention behind it. Now I have a question for you, for all of you. Are you able to accept bad tidings with the same joy that you can accept good tidings?
Not really.
Not really.
Not really, right? It's not so easy. And interestingly enough, Rava lived in a time period during Shapur II, that he was the king of Persia, and he persecuted the Zoroastrians. And it said, and there's some evidence that would suggest that the reason he didn't persecute the Jews that much was because Rava actually paid to maintain Jewish support during this time period to protect the Jews. So in some ways it was suggested that he might be like a court Jew protecting the Jewish people. Okay, so let's now add to the next, let's add the next layer to this story. Okay, who can actually read this? Susan, can you read it?
Yes, yes, I can. Rav Ahad said in the name of Rabbi Levi, what is the verse that alludes to this? I will sing of loving kindness and justice. Unto you, O Lord, will I sing praises, from the Psalms. Rav Ahad explains, if it is loving kindness, I will sing. And if it is justice, I will sing. I will thank God in song for the bad, just as for the good.
So what is this one telling us? What do we see different about this one?
Well, it's similar to the other in the sense that we're acknowledging both bad and good, and they are both worthy of either blessings or songs of praise.
But what kind is it? Is the expectation that you accept joy, or is there a different intention here?
Are equating justice? I mean, something that bad happens is a result of justice, and you're accepting the justice.
Correct.
Whereas with good, you just accept it. You don't have to worry about anything else.
Right.
Well, it looks like they're making a comparison of loving kindness and justice.
So
meaning one is good and one is bad?
Right. So it seems like chesed is good. Chesed equals tov, or good.
Mm-hmm.
And deen, or justice and judgment, equals bad. It would appear that way. However, is that necessarily true?
No.
Or is this maybe possibly talking about something different? That there's, even when something just happens that is not necessarily easy, right? But not bad, but just, you should give praise just as much as when there's chesed. So you could say that it's equating one to the other, or you could say it's not equating one to the other, right? That it might be talking about something different. That on the first part of the Gemara is talking about good and bad tidings, and the second part of the Gemara is literally talking about chesed versus deen, or loving kindness versus justice. That rachamim versus that deen, right? That mercy versus that justice. All right, so
Well,
go ahead, Susan.
Either one could be applied to good and bad. In other words, when something bad befalls us, we need loving kindness to lift us up.
Sure.
And a justice might be something that is handed down to us to teach us, which we wouldn't consider good. And so you could go either way with both of them.
Right. Absolutely. Shall we go on to the next part?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Michael, are you good with reading again for us?
Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani said, proof is from here, as it is stated. In God I will praise his word, Lord, I will praise his word. Gemara explains that in God I will praise his word, that is the revelation of God's attribute of benevolence. In the Lord I will praise his word, that is the attribute of suffering. Even if God brings suffering to bear upon me, I will still praise him.
So what is this telling us? This is very simple, right? It's saying it doesn't matter if it's benevolent or suffering. What are you supposed to do?
Praise him.
Praise him. Hallelujah. Right? You still say hallelujah, whether it's one or the other. All right, let's go on to the next. Michael, do you mind reading it?
I got the rabbi's names right, but I'll try. Said, the proof is from here, as it is stated, I will lift up the cup of salvation and call upon the name of the Lord. And I found trouble and sorrow, but I called upon the name of the Lord.
Okay. So what's happening here?
Good or bad, you still praise God.
Good or bad, it still praise God. So I have a story to share with you. It's a personal story. And I was contemplating whether I should share this story or not share this story. So please, so my son, as most of you I know, passed away, right? And before he passed away in August of 2015, so he passed away in May of 2016, but in August of 2015, he suffered from a series of strokes. And when he suffered from these strokes, he could not talk when he first had them. And when he started talking, he was not lucid yet. And he started talking in a loop. And the loop went on, he probably spoke in a loop for about 48 hours. And during this loop, he said, I'm dying. Shemi, save me. I'm dying. Shemi, save me. Shemi came from the Hebrew name for God of Hashem, which means the name. And if you think about it, Shemi is this, Shemi is a diminutive name, right? Like a very close name. But actually, if you look in the Hebrew, Shem plus E literally is my name, right? Like he's literally calling him almost like my God, like Hashem Shali, right? So Shemi. So when you hear a story like this, when you hear this personal, even during the time of the most trouble and sorrow, there was calling to the name, right? So what layer does that add to this? What is there also? What do you do when there's times of trouble? What do you do? What do you do?
Ask God for help.
You ask God for help, right?
And if God doesn't help you, do you turn away from God?
And that's the question. If God doesn't help you, do you turn away or do you continue believing? Because remember, it says Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, right? And we're supposed to be Adim. And we're allowed to wrestle and we're allowed to grapple, but we're also supposed to still believe at the same time. And so the belief is still, the idea is still call upon God. I found trouble and sorrow, but I called upon the name of the Lord, right? You call upon that time, that you call upon God. That doesn't mean that you can't grapple, though. But what does grappling mean? Right? So like we say, you're supposed to believe, you're supposed to praise, whether it's good or it's bad. You're supposed to accept good tidings and bad tidings. And but that is very different. Accepting good tidings and bad tidings is very different than being said in a time of trouble, call to God. There's a difference. It's not the same. It's not the same intention. Is it similar? It could be. Could it be different? Absolutely. It could be different too. Yeah, Ricky.
When we say a mishaberach, are we asking God to make the person better or to make us deal with the situation better?
Which one are we doing?
For me, it's to make the situation better.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to blame God for, he's too busy. He doesn't have, he's just too busy to inflict a wound on everybody.
Yeah. Tommy, you look like you had something to say.
I think Misha Baruch is again have a double sword to it, that we are asking for comfort, but on a way we still have hope.
Right.
As long as the person is alive, and we still hope that it will help through prayers to help. So
Right.
many things don't come one layer, it's other parts too.
Right. Siduka Din, right? Theodicy is the English words of it, right? There's so many layers to it. So many layers. Edward, go ahead.
2 comments. Number one, I just quickly looked up with Rabbi Shmuel ben Nachmai, goes back to what I said about Bereshit, because he uses, the first word for God, he uses Elohim, and then Lord is Yud-Hey Vav-Hey.
Yeah.
As far as the Mishaberach is concerned, I agree with what a lot of people said, but I also look upon it on a slightly different level also, and this may be my own perspective, and that is we think in terms, for modern terms and so on, where we have telephones, we have the internet, we have everything else. But one serious concept in Judaism is Bikur Cholim, visiting the ill and so on. And 3-4 generations ago, when you were in the synagogue, by announcing a Mishaberach, you essentially were telling the community that this person was ill. So basically, now it's part of that whole community. We don't think of it that way today because, we don't have to use a Mishaberach to announce it to the rest of the community. But it's sort of part of helping the person also get better because now the community is aware of it. They're going to be visiting as part of Birchut Cholim and so on. And very often that can help the person who is ill. So it has many different levels, at least the way I look at it.
I love that. That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. Thank you. All right. Michael, you're on again.
And the rabbi said, the proof is from here. As it is stated, the Lord is given and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord.
So basically, Chazal, which is the rabbis, are basically saying what? Either way, God gives and God takes. But we should still bless. We should still say hallelujah. Yeah, right? And then the final text.
Rav Huna said, the Rabbi Meir said, and so it was taught in the name of Rabbi Akiva. One must always accustom oneself to say, everything that God does, he does for the best.
And that adds another layer, right? Like, is everything for the best? Can you say everything's for the best?
No.
Like this is where
it's a question of faith.
Right. Now, interestingly enough, I did a lot of research on these rabbis. So some of the rabbis live in times that are relatively easy. So Rava, Rav Aha, Rabbi Levi, Rabbi Shmuel, and Rabbi Kahum, okay? But then you get, and Rav Huna and Rav. But Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Akiva in particular did not have an easy time. They're both from the time of the Mishnah. They're from around the Bar Kokhba revolt, which if you know about the Bar Kokhba revolt, it's around 130, it's from 132 to 135 CE. The Great Revolt happened in 70 CE with the destruction of the temple. So they were just right after the destruction of the temple. Then the Bar Kokhba revolt happens. There's anywhere from between 800,000 to 1 million Jews who were killed during this time frame. Okay? And Rabbi Akiva, on top of it, is said to have lost about 20,000 of his students to a plague. Rabbi Meir is said to have had his sister-in-law taken away by the Romans and sold to a brothel to be a prostitute. And he went and he actually freed her. Like he went to find her and rescue her. So these are not necessarily people who haven't gone through their own woes of life. It's not like these are people who have had easy peasy lives and then everything was fine. And Rabbi Meir actually lost 2 sons. So we're not necessarily talking about individuals whose lives were so easy. And we don't know as much about the other lives, right? But like the truth is, the ones who we know who had the hardest lives are basically saying everything that God does, he does for the best. So does that mean to be the best, Rabbi, you have to say that? Or does that mean that that's just their take and their perception of how life should be? Right? So let's add in another text now. So now we're going to the Guide for the Perplexed, and it's Rambam. So who's Rambam? I know some of you who know who Rambam is. I see Edward smiling. Ed, do you want to tell us who Rambam is?
He lived about, I guess, about 1,000 years ago. He was a very well philosopher.
Yep.
He also was a physician.
Yep.
I believe at one point he was actually the physician to the king of Egypt.
Correct. So he was born.
But I believe most of his work was done, I believe, in Italy.
So he was born in 1135 in Cordova, Spain.
Right. Oh,
And when he was 13 in 1148, around the time of his bar mitzvah, the Almohads came to power, and they were a Muslim group that persecuted the Jews horribly. And his family needed to flee, and they went to Fez, Morocco. And from Fez, Morocco, they ended up going to Egypt very soon after, because in Fez, the Almohads were also there. And it looks like at some point they pretended to be Muslim to hide their Jewishness, to protect themselves, but they always actually practiced Judaism. And Rambam created the Mishnah Torah, which was basically a Cliff Notes version to the Talmud. And then he also wrote this book called The Guide for the Perplexed. And so we're reading The Guide for the Perplexed from part 3, and there's 3 parts to it, 12:1. Who can actually read? Melissa, can you see it?
I can't.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay.
Okay. Men frequently think that the evils in the world are more numerous than the good things. Many sayings and songs of the nations dwell on this idea. They say that a good thing is found only exceptionally, whilst evil things are numerous and lasting. Not only common people make this mistake, but even many who believe that they are wise. Al-Razi wrote a well-known book on metaphysics or theology. Among other mad and foolish things, it contains also the idea, discovered by him, that there exists more evil than good. For if the happiness of man and his pleasure in the times of prosperity be compared with the mishaps that befall him, such as grief, acute pain, defects, paralysis of the limbs, fears, anxieties, and troubles, it would seem as if the existence of man is a punishment and a great evil for him. This author commenced to verify his opinion by counting all the evils one by one. By this means, he opposed those who hold the correct view of the benefits bestowed by God and his evident kindness. That God is perfect kindness, and that all that comes from him is absolutely good. The origin of the error is to be found in the circumstance that this ignorant man and his party among the common people judge the whole universe by examining one single person.
So what do we see here? What is this telling us? And this, Ricky, goes back to what you brought up at first. So what is this telling us? Tommy?
It's trying to tell us that we, and I think it's very true, that we are always looking at the hardship, the bad stuff. We are taking the good stuff granted, is granted. That's what it's supposed to be. And anything that's not like that, we are seeing it as that life is worse, and we somehow remember it more than the good stuff.
We remember the source. And
Yeah, more than the
joys, right?
Yeah.
We remember the oys instead of the joys. And what is Rambam telling us? That's foolish.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to just remember the oys and not the joys, that you have to look at the entire picture. And he goes on to say, Melissa, do you mind continuing?
Sure. For an ignorant man believes that the whole universe only exists for him, as if nothing else required any consideration.
We lost you, Yael.
You can't see me?
I can see you.
I can see you.
Okay.
Okay. If therefore anything happens to him contrary to his expectation, he at once concludes that the whole universe is evil. If, however, he would take into consideration the whole universe from an idea of it and comprehend what a small portion he is of the universe, he will find the truth. For it is clear that persons who have fallen into this widespread error as regards the multitude of evils in the world do not find the evils among the angels, the spheres and stars, the elements, and that which is formed of them, viz. Minerals and plants, or in the various species of living beings, but only in some individual instances of mankind. They wonder that a person who became leprous in consequence of bad food should be afflicted with so great an illness and suffer such a misfortune, or that he who indulges so much in sensuality as to weaken his sight should be struck with blindness, and the like. What we have in truth to consider is this: the whole mankind at present in existence, and a fortiori ever other species of animals, form an infinitesimal portion of the permanent universe.
So what is this telling us? What is Rambam trying to get across here?
There's more than just one instance. There's more than just one person.
That's right.
Maybe it's healthy to look beyond the things that make us sad or doubt and look at the universe as all the wonderful things that do exist. Take a walk in the woods and take a look at the creations that God, made. Not to negate anything that's on the other side of happiness and goodness, but to kind of balance things out and say that the world itself is good. People, in it perhaps bring on the ills that we are, suffering through.
And it doesn't mean that there's not true ills, right? He actually goes on to, and I didn't have enough to bring in because I wanted to bring in one more text for sure. But it's not that he doesn't grapple, right? But it's to say that you can't, it's also sometimes about attitude and your attitude in the situation, right? That sometimes you need to bring yourself and your attitude and step up to the plate and say, how am I going to respond to this difficulty? How am I going to respond to this hardship? And also recognize that you don't ask that question when things are easy.
Of course
So
not.
if you don't ask it when it's easy, why do you always ask it only when it's hard? Because your perception, right? So it's a lot about perception. So let's read the final text that we have time for, because I don't think we have time for the very last text, but I want to get to this text. So Martin Buber is a German philosopher. He was an adult Jewish educator, and he was from, he's German. And to give you an idea, he lived until 1965, and he fled during the Nazi occupation to the British Mandate of Palestine because he was stopped from being able to practice his trade of being a Jewish educator, and because he was a German Jew, he was able to survive because it came, early enough in the conversation of the Shoah that he was able to flee. So that's the context of this particular text. Who can read this? Ricky, can you read it for us?
How is life with God still possible in a time in which there is an Auschwitz? The estrangement has become too cruel, the hiddenness too deep.
So I'm going to stop you there for 2 seconds. There's this concept called Hester Panim, or the hidden face of God, which is that God has turned from us. And the most famous story of Hester Panim that is always told is Purim, that God is hidden and not seen. All right, and that's why God is not brought up in the Megillah, because of Hester Panim. But that doesn't mean God's not there. So there's a lot of theology around this concept of Hester Panim. Okay, so that's where the hiddenness comes from. All right, go on, Ricky.
One can still believe in the God who allowed those things to happen, but can one still speak to him? Dare we recommend to the survivors of Auschwitz, the Job of the gas chambers, give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endureth forever. But how about Job himself? He not only laments, but he charges that the judge of all earth acts against justice, and he receives an answer from God. But what God says to him does not answer the charge. It does not even touch upon it. The true answer that Job receives is God's appearance only. Nothing is explained, nothing adjusted. Wrong has not become right, nor cruelty kindness. Nothing has happened, but that man again hears God's address.
Okay, and the rest of it?
And we by this is meant all those who have not got over what happened and will not get over it. Do we stand overcome before the hidden face of God? No. Rather, even now, we contend we too with God, even with him. We do not put up with the earthly being. We struggle for its redemption, and struggling, we appeal to the help of the Lord, who is again still a hiding one. In such a state, we await his voice. Through his coming appearance resemble no earlier one, we shall recognize again our cruel and merciful God.
So what is this text saying? What's happening here in this text?
God is there, but he every once in a while turns his back on us. He's got something else to do.
And what happens? Is he all good, or according to Martin Buber, what else is he?
I'm not sure. Does he blame God for Auschwitz, or does he not?
Is he blaming or not blaming, or is he grappling or not grappling?
He's grappling.
He's grappling. Tommy.
He's really struggling with the whole concept in many ways. We struggle.
Yeah.
And he goes over it. Once it's struggle, once it's struggling. The struggle is constantly there.
And what's interesting, if you go back to the Jacob text that we read from Genesis, the angel hurt Jacob.
Right.
The angel did not treat Jacob well. And the angel grappled, right, with him, and he prevailed. And now we're called the one who wrestles with God. Judaism allows us to grapple, right? And we've seen that through these texts but when you grapple, that doesn't mean the same thing as belief and faith. There's a difference between grappling and believing. And Judaism recognizes that difference and says there's a difference. So in our last, like literally, we're a little over. Do you guys mind staying like 2 more minutes? Okay. So in our last few minutes, the question is, how do you grapple with COVID-19? Or with anything else that has happened in your life that's hard. But COVID-19 is what we're all living through right now, right?
Right.
As a human population across the globe, we are all dealing with COVID-19.
You know, many times we would go back to the Holocaust and, you know, you hear it echoing, where was God? God wasn't there. And I always look at, where were the people? Where were the people that, you know, knew what was going on? Where were the voices? Why were, you know, it was not that God was absent. It was humanity was absent. And I think that we look to God, well, we should look to God. I mean, continue to have a relationship, but God is not the solution to everything that is ill in the world. We have a lot of ability to, you know, we have tikkun olam, and we have all of these ideas of what we are supposed to do. And I think this virus is just one other example of how we have to find the solution. And the solution is, I mean, it's out there and we know it. We have to stay home. We have to distance ourselves. We have to wash our hands and not run out and say, I don't care. I want to live my life the way I want to live it. We have the ability and the power to find a solution to the ills, or some of the ills in the world. And God is there to give us a challenge and to give us the ability to find the remedy. Like I say, I was thinking of Maimonides, who is an unbelievable physician, and he understood illness. His greatness as a physician would not have been if everyone was healthy. The medical sciences would not be what they are if everyone was just, you know, never had anything of an ill to deal with. Our science is based on the problems and the challenges that we have in the world. And art is a reflection of that, and all of the sciences and disciplines comes out of the human condition.
Very nice. Anybody else? Ricky.
I have a personal story also. I have a granddaughter, when she was 9 years old, developed a virus, and it left her with an immune system that absolutely hates her. She's had spinalopathy, which is arthritis of the spine, since she's that age, and multiple other things. And this is a child, a young woman today, who, if her level of pain is a 4, she's having a good day. She's gone to multiple pain clinics, but she did not sit in the corner and suck her thumb. She went out, she did her share. And we share with God. God did not give us bread. God gave us wheat and soil and water and sun, and we made the bread. So I think I read somewhere it's an unfinished job, and we have responsibility to help finish it.
Very nice. Anybody else? So I think in my concluding component is remember, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Right? But don't just think about it as in terms of, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Think about it as, hear, the one who wrestles with God, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Okay?
This was fabulous.
This was fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I have had such perplexity where God is concerned for years. And a few years ago, I found my God. And you're adding to it. So thank you.
My